Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining today's Northern California NACD Veterans Cohort event. Again, my name is Craig Tatlonghari, and I'm one of the owners of RSM US LLP. We're a US-based professional services firm specializing in audit, tax, and consulting services with offices in every major market across the US, as well as over 120 countries across the globe. One of my duties I get to serve for the firm is to lead our firm's Bay Area chapter of the military-focused employee network group we call Valor. Valor's mission is to provide support, training, and mentorship to RSM's numerous team members who've served in the military or have ties to our country's military branches. On behalf of the owners and employees of RSM, we are honored to support NACD and to sponsor today's discussion. With no further ado, it's my absolute honor and privilege to introduce today's discussion leader, Brigadier General Patrick Huston. General Huston, the floor is yours, sir.
Hey, thanks a lot, Craig. Greatly appreciate what you and RSM do, not only for our veterans out there, but also for sponsoring this veterans event. Thank you very much.
You're very
As
welcome.
Craig said, I'm Patrick Huston. I'm an Army veteran. I am also the General Counsel at Ondas Holdings. We are an international technology and defense company traded on the NASDAQ. I also chair our advisory board. I want to thank you all for joining us today. I'm excited to be here with Chris Cassidy, a national treasure. Chris, welcome to NACD, and I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our audience.
Oh, Patrick, it's a great pleasure to be with you guys, and I'm honored to be part of this discussion. Um, uh, I it's interesting. I never planned a career of military service, and it's just super fascinating how life kind of unfolds with the guidance of mentors and the timing of individuals coming into and out of one's life. And that was the case for me. I was not a guy with space shuttles glued to my wall. I grew up in a small town in Maine. And in fact, I had Boston Celtics players glued to my wall. Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, if you remember those names. And I was a decent athlete, but knew I wouldn't get a scholarship to school. And I was a decent student, but knew I wouldn't get a scholarship for academics. So that kind of led me to explore ways to pay for college, and then the military jumped right out as a really clear, nice path. Didn't have any military influence in my family, but um, um, it resonated with me, particularly the service academies where the the settings were super cool, both West Point and Annapolis, and I was close enough to Groton, Connecticut, where I was familiar with the Coast Guard Academy as well. So, and wearing a uniform seemed like a no-brainer. You didn't have to decide what you're going to wear. So, I was excited to explore those opportunities. And there's an interesting story that I like to tell about my path into the academy, but and I'll hold that for a second. But that's just what led me to military service. And I thought I would just do 5 years and get out. And it just kept on being fun, kept on being um, rich with friendships and rich with experiences, not so much as your friends were making, particularly mid-career and later in career as civilians, but I felt like the military offered so much that it was fun to stay. And then I got selected as an astronaut at about the 11-year mark of my military journey, and remained active duty Navy and reported to the Johnson Space Center for the last 17 years of my career, and wrapped up 4 years ago as a NASA astronaut down there, retired from the Navy and NASA, and then joined the team of the National Medal of Honor Museum, which didn't exist 4 years ago. We were fundraising and managing construction, and just this year in March, so 9 months ago, we opened the doors of the Medal of Honor Museum, which were in Arlington, Texas, and that's been a neat new chapter of learning as well, managing a nonprofit, managing construction. Now we're an operating business, making decisions on how to get people into the building and provide quality experience and all of those things. It's good to be a new guy every now and then and learn new things because I think it keeps one fresh. But that's kind of me in a nutshell, Patrick. We can take that in any direction you want, but military career, 4 years now as a civilian leader. None of it was planned. It just all unfolded as opportunities presented themselves.
Thanks for that lead in. I have to be honest here and tell you that we're obviously doing this around a Veterans Day event. A lot of people in the audience understand the Army Navy rivalry. I went to West Point. You went to Annapolis. People are expecting me to make some sort of Navy joke right now. I'm gonna just disappoint them and tell them that I'm just so deeply impressed with this background of yours, this incredible journey, that I think you could have actually made a pretty decent soldier had you given it a shot.
Well,
Uh,
thank Patrick, one of my good buddies who I flew in space with, Drew Morgan, West Point graduate, and there's a cool picture of us together with the Navy and West Point shirt on the space station. It's one of my treasured photos because it represented good friendship and camaraderie between our two institutions, which is what it's all about. The good-natured ribbing is fun, but it's all about the deep-rooted respect.
No, I could not agree with you more. I will say that your resume is incredible. It's actually several incredible resumes all packed into one. And I'd love to know like about this journey of yours. You mentioned this transition from high school to the Navy, then you became a SEAL, then you head off into space, and then a CEO. Tell us about this kind of interesting journey and maybe some of these very unusual transitions there.
Mm, yeah. The transition from SEAL to astronaut was an interesting one. I thought that all astronauts had to be pilots. It didn't even dawn on me that myself as a guy running around in the SEAL teams was eligible to apply. But the first Navy SEAL to become an astronaut, his name was Bill Shepard, and I met him every summer. There's a SEAL reunion in Little Creek, Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia. There's a West Coast one too, but I was stationed in the East Coast, and I think it was this like the summer of 2000, maybe 1999, and I was at the SEAL reunion and just happened to be talking to this guy in line at the keg, and it was Bill Shepard, and we got chit-chatting. I learned that he was an astronaut and he was a Navy SEAL and he went to Annapolis and he had gone to graduate school and did an engineering degree, and all of this is the course of while we're waiting for our beers. And I asked him, like, you didn't have to be a pilot to be an astronaut? And like, nope, anybody can apply. You just have to be a U.S. citizen and have a college degree. And I was like, well, I got those things. And it dawned on me that it just all it cost was a little bit of time to put the application together and send it off. And so him entering my life was really just kind of interesting because he provided that little bit of knowledge, and the conversation sparked a seed of interest in me, and then that grew to a little bit more of a spark of wow, that would be really cool. I love what I'm doing in the SEAL team, so if I apply and don't get selected as an astronaut, no big deal. I really enjoy my job currently, and if I do get selected, oh my God, how amazing would that be? I'd get to represent our country on our nation's space program. So it was sort of a no-brainer calculus for me to put the effort into applying. I um, I got elected in 2004. So we select astronauts about every 4 years. And I was not selected that first time around. I was in graduate school, but hadn't completed it. And and then 4 years later, I had more experience in the military, had deployed to Afghanistan in combat zone. I had completed graduate school. I was just a more solid applicant, and that's when I got selected. So that transition, you asked about transitions, Patrick. That transition was an interesting one because um, when you're an astronaut, yeah, you fly in space, but most of the time you're not in space. And so what's the role of you when you're not there, when you're not launching or in space? And that's to train and prepare to be ready, but also to be a spokesperson for the agency out and about in the country. And that means talking about your profession. And when I got there in 2004, 9/11 was just 3 years old, and everybody was fascinated by um, people that had been to Afghanistan. Now, most communities have people that have were deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan in your community, but back then it was not a lot. And so I would be out at some school or some event talking about representing NASA, and people were asking me all about my time as a SEAL. And that was the most uncomfortable part of that transition, was getting used to opening up about my military journey, because now you can't swing around in Barnes and Noble without knocking over 4 or 5 SEAL guy books or hearing them talk yak away on TV. But it wasn't the case back then. It was a very quiet profession, and so I wasn't used to talking about it.
Now I'm taking notes here, and I'm thinking U.S. citizen plus college degree. If those are really the only two criteria to be an astronaut, I could even be one. I don't know if there's
There's
an
hope.
age.
There's hope for you even.
Okay, good. I know that in every phase of life there are these defining moments, and you've talked about that one next to the keg at your SEAL reunion, but kind of going back that transition you mentioned from high school into the Naval Academy or anything from that era that you
Yeah.
felt kind of shaped you into who you are today.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked about that, because that really was fundamental for me. As you remember, Patrick, you have to, for service academies, you have to apply to the school and to your congressman or senator's office. It's kind of two parallel applications. And I didn't understand that as a high school guy. So naively, I just applied to the congressman's office. I got an interview. It went well. The congressman's staff person, who at the time seemed like an old, experienced person, but now that I know congressional staffers, she was probably like 24 and right out of college. But she told me, "Yep, we take care. We'll send everything to the school on your behalf. We'll get you all squared away. You're all set." And that was in the fall of my senior year in high school. And then you fast forward to the spring of my senior year in high school, and everybody's finding out about schools. And I was is from other schools, but heard nothing from Navy. And I called the admissions office and asked the person, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I can help you. What's your name?" And I tell her my social security number, spell my name, and she looks and looks and looks, and I'm nowhere in the files. So I realized, oh my gosh, I hadn't even applied really, even though I had the congressional, what do you call it, nomination, but I wasn't an applicant. And so this is the point in life that's really fascinating, because on just by chance, my best friend and I had planned to join his dad, who was going on a business trip to Washington, D.C. So from Maine to D.C., it's like an 8 hour drive the next week, which was our spring vacation. And we were going to be sightseeing people while his dad was working. And we did that. Except one afternoon, I went over to Annapolis and went to the admissions office, and the same lady, she's like, "Oh, okay, I remember you. Well, you're lucky, because the New England region representative, Marine Corps Captain Malillo, he's in his office right now, and you can go talk to him. If anybody can help you out, it's him." So I walk into his office. I'd never seen a Marine before. I'd never seen a real, like, military officer in person before, actually. And I turn the corner, and he is like the poster child Marine, like you read about: fit, square jaw, haircut, shoes, you know, the whole deal. And I was super intimidated. Told him my story, and he kind of a few nonverbal nods or whatever. And I could tell he was looking deep in my eyeballs, like, is this guy worth my time? Is he, everybody, all the other kids did the application. What's wrong with this knucklehead? But he very politely said, "Okay, I'll get back to you." And so I leave and go back to my hometown thinking, well, at least I tried my best, but I'm got to come up with plan B. I'm not going, clearly not going to Navy. And then he called me the next week in school and said, "Hey, this is Captain Malillo here in Navy. I can get you into the Naval Academy prep school, but I need an answer on this telephone call if you want it or not." And Patrick, I didn't know what the prep school was, what it meant, what the time commitments were, none of that, but it just felt like a door that was tiny bit cracked open. And where side of that door do you want to be on? So I said, "Yes, thank you." And the reason now I realize that story, that moment in time was so critical for me, was because if without him, without that gift of an opportunity from a person that didn't owe me or know me or anything, you and I probably wouldn't be talking today. Like, without him, I wouldn't have gone to the prep school. Without going there, you get automatically admitted to the school the next year. Then I found myself in the SEAL teams, met Bill Shepard, found myself as an astronaut, and all of that possible because one person believed in a young man for whatever reason and gave me the gift of a lifetime. So that was a really, really instrumental moment in my life.
A super powerful lesson to us all about kind of the importance of people just stepping up and paying it forward to people who need their help. I think we all need a reminder of that sometimes. So thank you for sharing that.
And we probably all have a similar Captain Malone story in our lives, or maybe you are that person for someone else and you don't even know it, or you do know it. But
I don't know.
little moments in
It
time are
wasn't me, but
significant.
I hope to do that for people when I can. Um, I want to ask you the same question about your time in the SEALs. I know you haven't written a book on that SEAL time yet, and I'd love for you to have an opportunity to share this story. I do want to circle back eventually and kind of connect these stories of life along the way to kind of the boardroom and executive roles. But for now, just if you share these stories with us, I think that I would love it, and hopefully the audience will too.
About time in the SEAL teams?
Yeah. Anything
Yeah.
you can share, or is it all super top secret?
No, it's not all super classified. So, I graduated SEAL training in 1994, and so math in public is hard, but like those first 7 years, I guess, of my time, it was all pre 9/11 deployments, and we went overseas and trained with other nations' special forces, and I was in the Mediterranean a lot and trained with Italians and Spanish and different countries. Um, some semblance of real world military missions, but mostly training in those countries. And then 9/11 happened. I happened to be part of SEAL Team 3, and the SEAL Team Three's area of responsibility in the world was the Middle East. And so we knew we were, even before 9/11, we knew we were deploying to that region around Thanksgiving time of 2001. And so all of our pre-deployment training and everything was completed in August. And then a couple weeks later, 9/11 happens. And so we packed our stuff up and flew from San Diego to Kuwait. And we were in Kuwait for a couple days, a week maybe, and then an island in Oman and there for a couple days, and then flew directly into Kandahar, Afghanistan, like the first week in October, so of 2001. So it was very, very early, not a lot of military infrastructure, I mean, zero military infrastructure that first couple nights. And then we were able to patch up the bad guys bomb, they really messed up the runway, knowing that the runway was critical to supply missions. So that those first couple of nights we were just hunkered down and helping a few Seabees patch the runway, and then more and more C-130s could come in and get some infrastructure there, and then we shifted to doing operations. But I'll tell you, Patrick, you know that there's big operations require big. There's an iceberg that the pointy end for the pointy end to be out of the water. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you don't necessarily see, and that's the case with setting up a base to operate out of in a place where there's nothing. And when I went back in 2003, 2 years later, it was more like that established, but it was in stark contrast to those early months in the fall of '01, where we would do a mission, gather intel that night, and then that would inform what we would do tomorrow night, and kind of building the picture as we went. One particular mission that was probably close to Christmas of '01, maybe early into January, somewhere in that time frame, was to go explore some caves on the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan, caves that were known from when the Russians invaded Afghanistan. We, the United States, through the CIA, helped defend the Afghan guys and used the same caves as a base of operations and storage. So there was some intel that we knew that these caves existed, but we needed to go find out and get the bad guys out of there. And that was our mission, to go spend. It was supposed to be in one night, but we ended up being there 9 days. The caves were huge. It was over the span of a mile long of a ravine, and the caves going into the side of the mountain. Some of them big enough for one person to walk in. Some of them you could drive an 18-wheeler in. They were all connected through the mountainside. It was amazing. And that mission, like I said, was 9 days long and pretty significant because it was filled with ammunition and we blew the heck out of it. And that's what took us a long time to be there. But anyway, I there's lots of lessons, but I'll tell you where I spent Christmas Eve of 2001 looking for Santa Claus. There's a desert right there, kind of south of Kandahar, and that's where some known enemy patrols were around there. So we were camped out right on the edge of where it went from desert to sort of normal landscape. And I remember lying on the sand Christmas night, looking up at the stars, thinking about it was weird. I was thinking about my own kids half a world away, truly looking for Santa, but I was over there. It was really weird. It was a surreal feeling sleeping on the sand there that night. I don't know what made me
Interesting.
think of that, but
Well, interesting that you were looking up at the stars because I'd like to transition now to your time in NASA. After you got that acceptance into the program, anything from your experience or your different roles at NASA that you want to share with us?
oh man, there's so much to talk about. The first 2 years you're an astronaut candidate, so the astronaut class is usually 10 to 12 people every 4 years, and our class size was that exactly. It was 11 of us and three Japanese, so 14 total. And you come from all walks of life. So that first 2 years, you're basically in graduate school for space operations. You're in classroom half the time. You apply those theories from the classroom in the different simulators. First, one system at a time, just electrical system, just the computer system, just the environmental control system, and then the instructors start to weave those all together to the full system integration of the simulators. Ultimately, where you graduate at the end of that time frame, where you're eligible to be assigned to a crew. And but even then you don't you what you really are is in line waiting for your time to be assigned to a mission. So for example, from the timing perspective, I showed up there the summer of 2004. 2 years later, 2006, I was a qualified astronaut, and my first launch to space was on a space shuttle in 2009, the summer of 2009. So 5 years from selection till launch, and which is about normal. Space shuttle missions, 7 seats on the shuttle. You can think of the shuttle like a king cab pickup truck, two comfortable rows of places for people to sit, and a whole big cargo bay to haul your stuff. And the shuttle is just that way. Big cargo bay where we brought up components and pieces of the space station, or in earlier years, satellite launches or seeing things like this. And then there's an upstairs called the flight deck and a downstairs called the mid deck, total seating of 7 people. In my crew, we had Canadian astronaut Julie Payette, who later in life went on to become the Governor General of Canada, which is a pretty significant role in their government, very significant actually. And then we brought home a Japanese astronaut. So one of the coolest things I felt about spaceflight, other than floating and looking out the window and representing your own it was representing your nation on this international endeavor. I remember in that first mission sitting around the dinner table, there were 7 of us on the shuttle. We got base station, there were 6 people there. So of those 13, every nation of the International Space Station program was represented: Japan, Canada, the European Space Agency, which is about 15 or 16 member countries, but we had 2 astronauts from Europe up there, Russian cosmonauts, US astronauts, and then every country's food on the table, music shuffling from all the different countries, looking out the window, going by beneath you at 5 miles a second is the beauty of Earth. It's just unbelievable. And I couldn't even believe that I was there, actually.
Uh, that does sound quite beautiful. It's impressive to speak to someone who's actually been there. This isn't you're not just an actor. This is not a movie. You were really there. That's impressive, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. I would like to kind of transition now to your current role, your current chapter. Since you've left government, you've become an executive. Talk about the board, executive roles, and different organizations that you've been in. Can you just share what you've been doing since you got out of the military and government?
So relative to this organization, I pretty soon after I retired from the government, I joined the Navy SEAL Foundation Board of Directors and the JFK Presidential Library Board of Directors. So I've been with those organizations for 4 years as a board member myself, and then jumped into the role of a staff member president, but still a staff member of the organization, which has a board. So it's been really, really interesting for me to have the lens on both sides of a board and staff kind of relationship. And my first board meeting as a Medal of Honor Museum president, I had never conducted a board meeting. I had no idea what to expect of it, but I fell back to my military and NASA roots, and that's training and rehearse. And so I had, my staff looked at me like I was a nut job, but I had each staff member represent a different board member and try to mimic their personalities, and we ran through a dry rehearsal of a board meeting 2 days before it, and then again the day before. And I think they realized, okay, he's not a nut. He's just trying to have us be represented well, and it worked. We were ready. And since I don't do that anymore because I kind of know how to run a board meeting, but that first time was intimidating. Rex Tillerson, the former Secretary of State, is on the board, and I remember that first board meeting. He's sitting across from me, and I had this humongous imposter syndrome of what in the hell am I doing running this board meeting when there's Rex Tillerson sitting there looking at me? But it's interesting. I've figured out in life that everybody is intimidated at the start of every job. It doesn't matter the level. It doesn't matter the organization or the fancy word NASA or whatever. Everybody's intimidated in that first day, those first weeks on the job. And you just have to realize, I've realized in life that the reason you got put there is because people believe you have the tools to be successful. And so as soon as I got out of my own head and realized, okay, this is not rocket science. We're just running a meeting. It's just getting the staff aligned to execute the priorities of the board. It's really don't overcomplicate it and get on with the mission. That was an enlightening moment for me. Like they believe that we as a staff can be successful, so let's be. We were so the Medal of Honor Museum, we just opened 9 months ago, as I mentioned in the intro, $300 million philanthropic raise. Only 15 million of that is public money from the state of Texas for education programs. The rest of it was all private donors and companies, which we're really proud of. We do have a construction loan because many of those gifts were pledged over 3, 4, and 5 year periods of time. So we're paying a construction loan, but that will be paid off in 2 years' time. But I learned so much because you get a lot of lessons as a military person and a government worker, but you don't really truly hire people necessarily. You don't really truly fire people necessarily. You don't have to report to a board. You just got your commanding officer and whoever, or whatever the structure is. So much interesting learning for me. And it made me appreciate being new to an organization because it keeps you sharp. It keeps you learning. You realize that your team exists of people that have the tools and the knowledge to help the organization, and you just have to let it happen and let the team work. So thankful that I had this opportunity to be part of the Medal of Honor Museum.
Now, congratulations on that. And I will say that all of that resonated with me, and particularly the importance of rehearsals. I have benefited from rehearsals in the past, but frankly, I benefited from them because there have been a few disasters where I failed to adequately rehearse. And the painful lessons from that taught me the importance of rehearsal. So
Yeah.
that one really resonated with me. So
What
Chris,
would you call it in the Army? You call them rock drills, I think.
uh,
Right? Rock.
rock
Yeah.
drills is absolutely one of our yeah, it can be that simple. Just moving little
It can be
rocks on the
that
table
simple.
or in the sand, yeah.
Exactly.
But whatever it
Exactly.
takes to kind of perfect your plan is important. And that kind of leads into this next question because the title of this session is From the Navy SEALs to Astronaut to the Boardroom. And I think a lot of people in the audience might think that those are all very, very different places where the lessons don't necessarily translate well. What's your perspective on that? Are there some that do and some that don't? Or are they just two wildly different areas?
I've thought a lot about this actually because at take just SEAL and astronaut, for example. At face value, they seem totally different. The bad guys are trying to shoot you in one instance. In the other instance, the bad guy is the environment, the vacuum of space trying to kill you. Totally different scenarios. But really, at its fundamental core level, they are the same. It's a small group of people backed up by the iceberg that I talked about, um, trying to collectively accomplish a risky, challenging mission. And so the the skill sets were very, very similar. Being able to talk on the radio, convey with what you're seeing with your eyes into your brain and your mouth, and come out the radio with that semblance of coherent communication that's helpful to everybody and not just babble on the radio, because that's the same case in the military as it is in space. In space, your eyeballs are the only thing seeing the real situation, and usually that it's dealing with something that's broken or some kind of complication to the plan that you have to overcome, and that's the case in the military too, right? The plan only survives first contact. So it's all about how the team adapts and overcomes and gets through those challenges. And I think that's where training and preparation come, because the more prepared a unit is, the baseline is the foundation is so strong that everybody kind of anticipates where you're going to go, given a certain, because you're never going to anticipate every what if that could happen. But if you have thought through many of them, you're starting out stacking the deck in the right sense in terms of risk management. But then when I got to be a civilian leader, I realized too that it's just the people. It's just people getting the mission done. The mission's different. The culture's different. Like you couldn't use the same humor that you use in a SEAL locker room or an astronaut locker room here in the building of a museum, but it's still just people with wants and needs and pain points that need to be dealt with to accomplish the mission, whatever it is. So even though they're fundamentally different, it's all about people and alignment of effort.
That's wonderful to hear that. I will say even in especially in the Northern California chapter here, we're such a technology hub, Silicon Valley, etc. Technology, technology, technology. But what you just hammered on is that all comes back to people who are really driving things, and I think that's a really important takeaway here. In a couple of minutes, I'm going to open it up to questions for our audience to drop some questions into chat. I will take those questions and share some of them that we have time for. But before we do that, I want to ask you one kind of overarching question about guidance and tips for board members. This is obviously an association of board directors. We have other executives and leaders in the audience. Do you have maybe a few of your tips or tricks or practical guidance that you're willing to share for leaders? I know not everything applies to everybody, but some tips that you're willing to share with this group that may work for them in the right circumstance.
I mean, I only have 4 years of experience doing this, but the cool thing that I've felt, as I mentioned, is having a lens through the staff side of it as the president and having a lens as the board side on the two that I mentioned. And one of the things that I felt as the president was annoyance. Maybe that's too strong of a word, but just when board members it felt like they were trying to do the job of the staff. It was difficult to say, hey, just give us the guidance, let us execute. If we fail, you can hammer us, or give us course corrections, but we don't need you doing our job. And that made me more cognizant of that as a board member in board meetings to realize as much as sometimes I wanted to jump in and say, hey, you guys ought to do this, um, at the more tactical level, trying to keep my head at the, 10,000 foot or whatever altitude you like, level on the more strategic side. So I think sometimes it's a hard balance, particularly if you're an operator of a company, a hard balance to know where that line is between board overextendance and board the proper level for a board. And I don't have, like I said, I don't have a lot of experience, but a couple examples of it on both sides of the equation have been enlightening for me.
Thanks, Chris. I was just looking through some of our comments here. I've got a couple that they appear to be closely related. And one of them is asking you for your guidance or input or recommendations on how you recommend that boards handle crisis management. And then kind of closely related to that is, have you ever had a Houston, we have a problem moment while in space?
The Houston, we have a problem. Yes, I was on a spacewalk in 2013 with an Italian astronaut, Luca Parmitano, and his spacesuit malfunctioned such that water that was not supposed to be in the spacesuit was entering his helmet, and his helmet was flooding with water outside in the vacuum of space. And so we had to hurry up and get back inside. And getting back inside is not a fast process, and you can only make the air move so fast when you repressurize. And so we got back in, we got the helmet off, and everything was fine. But he probably, from the onset of the water, it was like a spacewalk is about 6.5 or 7 hours long. The water was evident at about 45 minutes into the spacewalk, and it took another 45 minutes to get back inside. And in that 45 minutes, the water went from just a little bit on his head to covering his eyes and his ears and his nose, and he couldn't see, hear, or talk. And we were probably, by the leak rate, we estimated about 5 to 6 minutes left of available time where he could still breathe. So that was a significant, and they made a Disney documentary about it that came out not too long ago, which was interesting, called Among the Stars, because that was a crazy, crazy moment. And then what was the first question? I forgot.
It was just any crisis management tips, either in
Oh,
general or specifically to board members.
well, again, I just harken back to military training and NASA and pre-mission training for NASA, and that is, it's way easier to deal with a crisis at what we call 0 knots and 0 altitude, when you're just sitting around a table and you can kind of think through things. And as I mentioned, you're never going to know or anticipate every crisis that's out there. But if you have kind of a good spreading butter on a toast of general crises that you've thought through as an organization, it sure does make the execution of whatever the real crisis is a little bit easier, because you've got some place to start from that's a little further down the field than the 1 yard line, your own 1 yard line.
It's like you were reading from the NACD crisis management module, and the importance of doing these boardroom tabletop exercises to prepare for this. That was very consistent with what
I didn't
with
cheat. I didn't read it. I was
you could have written it though. You could have written it though. So a couple more questions here for you. One is just any tips or ideas for both interviewing and selecting board members or executives, and then onboarding board members or executives, things that go well, things that can go poorly. Any recommendations you have on that front?
I don't have a whole lot of recommendations on the hiring part. We at the Medal of Honor Museum, we just do ask our board network to mention names, or if we need a certain industry represented, seek people in that industry that might suggest somebody. I think for me, a conversation that we're actively having right now is, what do you do with a dud board member that doesn't show up, that doesn't participate? And I hate to say it, but they exist. And do you wait for their term to be up and you just grind through 2 more years of nothing? Or do you take action, which is a little more slap in your face kind of thing, especially for a nonprofit? I've never been part of a for-profit board, which, by the way, I'm happy to do. Uh, but the on a nonprofit, it's a little bit harder. Like their time as a volunteer, but yet you're going to fire them. So, but we're dealing with that, not because the person's a bad person. He just doesn't have the time to show up and doesn't. So I don't have an answer for it, and I'd love to have a conversation with somebody that has dealt with that because what we're doing right now is just waiting for the term to expire and not reelect. But I don't know if that's always the right path. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a complicated one. Lots of times there are financial backings behind the person that's there, and I can see how that can be a very difficult subject. But you're right, it's not something we really discuss that often, but it's something that warrants a discussion. I just wanted to clarify one point, make sure I heard you right. Like, if there are any boards in the audience here who are looking for a member of a corporate board, you might be open to discussions. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. This is not a TV commercial. I didn't intend to do that when I said I'd be on
Okay.
the show here, but would love to have that
Okay.
conversation.
Okay. That's music that I think everyone's ears hear. Another question that came up is, I think your energy, your enthusiasm, your positivity, and the joy that you have for your job is really shining through. One of the questions is like, how do you keep up that energy and then transfer it to your teammates? Like, is that a challenge, or is it just naturally 100% that way?
I'm a little bit of a more introverted person, and over time, the energy part has come out just by being in different leadership positions, realizing that um, when I was a young person, I fed off the attitude, the demeanor, the energy, the positivity of the people that I was reporting to. And negative energy also transfers and transferred to me when I was younger and in those weird situations. So I try to be a good model of it. Um, when I first got the job at the Medal of Honor Museum, as I mentioned, I was like overwhelmed, not overwhelmed, but a little bit intimidated. Like, I don't know how to do this. I've never been a president of a nonprofit before. So I allowed my fitness to slip and my eating kind of slipped and junky eating. And I'm not a nut job about eating, but I just wasn't being consistent with it, and I gained probably 20 pounds of stupid weight and wasn't consistent with working out. And again, I'm not a nut. I was pretty fit when I was 25. Now I just do exercise to feel good about myself and make sure the belt loop doesn't go one thing bigger. But the that was my key realization, I guess is what I'm trying, rambling way saying. Now I try to always get a couple workout, at least 3 workouts in a week, and and just be realizing that when I feel that I'm getting exercise, I'm able to be positive and happy. And that's just how my brain works. And when I don't, I get lethargic, I get tired, and it's harder to keep up that momentum.
I, I I've heard that described before as attitudes are contagious, good and bad attitudes. I think we're all benefiting from the positivity that you have right now. I feel better just kind of listening to you and your optimistic view on things. This is great. I appreciate this. I think we all do. And we're just about out of questions, at least that I've caught on the chat. So well, there was one other comment in there that I caught. It said, "Go Navy, beat Army." And so it hardly seems worth mentioning, but I will just say that someone took the time to write that. So I think they're clearly a fan of yours, Chris.
Oh,
Uh,
thanks.
but
Hey, I just saw one pop up that
okay,
said asking about astronaut selection, which might be a fun topic to talk about super quick in the last minute.
no, that's perfect. I'm glad you caught that. Thank you. Yes, tell us
Um,
about this.
so yeah, so I was the chief astronaut from 2015 to 2017, and we select astronauts every 4 years, and one of those cycles fell in that middle of that time frame. So in that capacity, I was the chair of the astronaut selection board, and it was really interesting to watch all the interviews. We interviewed 120 people for the lots more applied, but the actual interview in Houston was down to 120 folks for 10 spots, and trying to pull out folks that were trying too hard to be something that they thought we wanted them to be. That's how the crew selection was very difficult because everybody's can be their best self in a sunny day in a nice environment. It's a little harder when, you're getting shot at or your spacesuit's leaking. So trying to figure that out is difficult, and you can't make everybody stay up for 3 days and then interview them. So it was a real challenge. I can't remember who asked that. I didn't see who asked that question, but it was a good one. Thank you, because it's a challenge for us to get the right mix of a personality, both from the technical stuff's pretty easy. It's the soft skills that are a little more challenging to sort out.
Uh, there's another question here, and it was, what can someone expect if they come to visit the National Medal of Honor Museum? And just remind the audience where it is in Texas.
It's in Arlington, Texas, which is right near DFW Airport, and that picture right there is it. It's a cool architecture where the museum is suspended by five giant columns. Each column represents a branch of the service. That's the nature of the building itself. And then inside the museum, it's all about storytelling. You can go other places that they'll tell you about the history of World War II or see amazing airplanes or tanks and jeeps. This is a place where we tell stories of normal people who did something amazing on a day when the nation needed them to do that. So storytelling is what you'll see.
Another question came in while you were sharing that last bit. What do you think of the most important personality trait for a leader is, if you can narrow it down to just one?
Yeah, it's hard, right? I think in general is just be yourself and do what you say you're going to do. I know when I was younger, it annoyed the crap out of me when I felt like the leader said one thing and didn't demonstrate it or would do something different from what they said they were going to do without any rationale given on why the delta. So consistency, being true to who you are, not trying to be somebody else, I think for me are really important.
Okay, Chris. Um, I didn't realize you were also the chief astronaut on top of everything else, that you selected other astronauts. Anything else you're not telling us about this incredible career of yours?
I like Sudoku puzzles.
Oh, do you do it easy, medium, or hard?
No, man, bring it hard.
I like that. I knew you were going to say that. I think we all knew you were going to say that. So that's good. That was actually a softball question for you.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
no, listen, I'm going to give you a chance to summarize, kind of maybe pass a final thought or final message for the audience here. This has been a phenomenal discussion. I have learned so much, but also enjoyed the whole discussion with you. Any parting thoughts for the audience from perspectives of any of those incredible roles that you've had?
No, I mean, I've enjoyed the conversation as well, and we covered a lot. It's hard to summarize it all, but in general, I think the experiences, the interactions with people um, throughout life gives you the tools for the next step of it, and and it's just kind of cool to be talking to this group here who are all directors, and I'm humbled to be participating in this discussion because you all are have your own experiences and could be on this giving the advice yourself. So thank you for allowing me the chance to share mine. And yeah, it's just life is so cool when it happens around you.
Thank you for that. I will say, Chris, that very thankful not only for you just being here and sharing your thoughts on all of these topics with us today, but also thank you for all that you've done for our nation, for our military, for our space program, for our community in different settings. We're really, really grateful for your incredible service. I want to also thank our sponsors, our RSM, and our audience for joining us here today.